Why do I always do this? Hi pals. Here we are. It's November. It's non-fiction November, bitch. We all know I love a good non-fiction book, particularly if it's somebody's misery memoir, to be completely fucking honest. I'm here to tell you about some of my most enjoyed, I wouldn't say favourite, non-fiction books that I have enjoyed the most or have had the most impact on me. I don't know. Fucking hell, I don't know. Because I read a lot of non-fiction about people dealing with mental illness. Mostly eating disorders, but like also generally just mental illness. It's mental illness, innit? So I have a short stack of books that I just wanna, I don't know, tell you about, recommend, discuss briefly. And we know I have a very, very large shelf of unread non-fiction. If you want to read more about that, I have an entire blog post. I will link that down below. Let's go! Whatever order, I don't fucking care. So the first book I'm going to discuss is Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars, a dangerous trans girl's confabulous memoir by Kai Cheng Tom. Look at this amazing cover. Absolutely beautiful. So I've talked about this book a few times. I've also talked about this on my blog briefly. But basically this is like a very creative non-fiction piece. It follows what happened in Kai Cheng Tom's life, but in a very surreal fantasy kind of way. And there are sections of poetry, which was the only bit that I didn't really enjoy the poetry of it. It didn't really add anything for me. But yeah, there's a mixture of different writing techniques. There's also like kind of a script moment just to get like the impact and speed of conversation without having lots of filler in between. I won it in a giveaway last year. And I'm really glad I did, because it just the way it's written is just so unique and interesting for any kind of non-fiction memoir that I've ever read. So this is definitely something that I recommend. As the title says, it's about trans women, mainly BIPOC or BIPOC or BIPOC. I don't know. I say BIPOC because that's just how my brain interprets that. But I mean, there's obviously trigger warnings for like transphobia, violence, you know, things that come with being trans. But it is a book that I recommend. It's pretty small as well, so yeah, it's like what, 200 pages ish. It's a relatively fast read. It's not that difficult as well, even though it's very fantasy-esque. It's pretty easy to read, which I appreciate. The next book is Queer Intentions, A Personal Journey Through LGBTQ+ Culture by Amelia Abrams. Another book that I got free, basically, thanks to Book Break. I went to the launch of this book back when you could go outside. Yeah, this was, oh wow, was this 2019? Yeah, it must have been 2019. So basically, the way I kind of have described this, I've also talked about this in other places like my blog. Everything will be linked down below if you want to read more of what I thought at the times of actually reading these books, because this is me talking about the books when I haven't read them recently. But the way I describe this book is kind of like an introduction to queer history, but also introduction to like queer politics generally right now, because there's definitely a mixture of talking about like historic queerness, like voguing, where voguing came from, how that came about, stuff like that I had absolutely no idea about because I am white English and I hate going outside. But then also there's a mixture of things of what's going on currently in different places around the world, which I found really interesting. There was a documentary that Ellen Page made. I think it was called Gaycation. It's kind of like that, but in a book form. And I think the final chapter is one that I found pretty interesting, or one of the last few chapters, titled Queer Utopia, about queer non-binary polyamorous relationship in Sweden having and raising a child together. Like this book just made me think about the ways different people lived a bit more, and opened up my mind to being like, hey, actually that's kind of a good idea. But it's a mixture of the rich culture of queerness in different places around the world, but also the different kinds of struggles that we all have. So like in Sweden, they like to make you think they're really progressive because they have really low like rates of hate crime, but actually it's just because they don't let you report them. There's still homophobia there, you know. It's not a utopia that everyone thinks it is. There's some about drag culture as well. It's been quite a while since I've read this, but it's one that I wanted to keep just because I did find it really interesting. I think it would be very useful to go back and read again at other points. So that's one I recommend if you're like me, white, don't have much culture, haven't had much experience with other culture, you know. Also because we're stuck inside, it's a pretty good way to experience the world, you know. My next book is, I think this is the first book I read this year, or at least I finished it this year. Biting Anorexia, a first-hand account of an internal war. So I have a lot of love-hate relationships with eating disorder memoirs. I have another one in my list too. These two made the list basically because it doesn't do like the soapbox thing. It doesn't make you idolize these sick women. It doesn't make you idolize a mental illness, whereas a lot of books I've picked up and read that are about people dealing with mental illness always tend to err on like self-indulgent and self-gratification, whereas these two books kind of take you through the journey of how shitty it is and how horrible lots of things are. I think this one as well didn't include numbers and measurements, which is like rare, to be honest, because there are many of the particularly eating disorder ones just spew numbers at you, which is and can be extremely triggering. So like even in Unbearable Lightness by Portia de Rossi, that I enjoyed and related to a lot because of the like combination of being queer, an actor, and eating disordered. But she threw a lot of numbers out there and a lot of specifics about how she ate. And then I picked up another book for 99p. It was an ebook. It was the worst thing I've ever read in my fucking life, and it really was just wanking off to our own sadness, basically. You know, I'm just not here for that. These books, you know, all of these kinds of books can be triggering, and that's just how it is. But there is a way that you can do it that is helpful for other people struggling with this, or for people who know someone who's struggling with this, you know. So I can't really remember the specifics of this story, but it's just written like a diary, you know. I think it's a lot of copy and paste from like real time when she lived these experiences, lots of email chains and stuff too. But you know, she gets a good ending, and there's a whole load of resources in the back of the book, which is like, you know, a bare minimum. But also a lot of books don't do that either. Lucy Howard Taylor did a pretty good job of this one. I think I related to this as well because I think, well, like, she's a writer, but she is a poet and was studying English relatable content in it. So my next one of those is Hungary by Crystal Wren. A young model's story of appetite, ambition, and the ultimate embrace of curves. So this one's a bit more of a biography, I guess, because she's a celebrity. It's a bit more like a biography. And I mean, it has pictures of her when she was very skinny, but because she's a model, it's kind of hard to avoid, you know, like, even if they weren't included in the book, someone would have been able to find these somewhere else, you know. And I read this a really long time ago. This is on my list of books I'd like to reread because it had such an impact on me when I read it. God, I don't even know when I read this book. yeah, basically it's kind of it just sort of shows you how she got into modelling. There are parallels with Portia de Rossi's book, because she started off modelling before she got into acting. You know, the business, treating you like shit. But, you know, this story ends with her becoming a plus size model and how she got through the eating disorder, basically. At 14, I was a regular high school student in Clinton, Mississippi, when a modelling scout told me, you could be a supermodel and then you'll have to lose a little weight. For glamour, fame and escape, I lost 70 pounds. This is a photo of me at 16 when I signed a big modelling contract, moved to New York City and started travelling around the world. Also when I developed a ferocious case of anorexia and exercise bulimia, began to lose my hair, developed frequent bruises and experienced frequent heart palpitations. Crystal Wren's experience debunks the modern day Cinderella story of the fat girl who loses weight to get happy. This is a new fairy tale, one in which a young woman embraces the size she's supposed to be and the world opens up for her. You know, which is a mood, but also she is like a very stereotypically beautiful white woman with curves in the right places. But I mean, this book came out quite a while ago. I returned to my natural size 12. I think that must be American size 12. I think that might be my size. Yeah, I think that's my size. Yeah, 2009. So, you know, hopefully things have moved forward a little bit since then, but probably haven't. I liked the book. I remember liking the book, and I think I'll like it when I read it again. I can't remember how specific it was with food, calories, weights. I think she obviously talks about size of like clothes, because I mean, she's a model, clothes is her business. So yeah, for the last two books, very obviously trigger warnings. If you are struggling with something like that, maybe don't read it, but obviously it's up to you. And the last book on my list is a let's just go with a controversial choice, Brave by Rose McGowan. So I'm gonna just say this quickly now. It's controversial for numerous reasons. She, you know, isn't the best liked person in the world, and there have been claims of transphobia, which I have tried to look into, but I haven't really found what people are talking about. So if you have got any links for that, leave it in the comments. I would love to read up on it. But I sort of went through a patch where I was really fascinated by what she was doing, and I listened to a podcast she was on, and actually she identifies as non-binary, which I thought was really interesting. So I grew up watching Charmed. I still fucking love Charmed, and sort of seeing one of the actresses or actors from my favourite show sort of become an activist and being demonized by Hollywood's demons, basically, was very fascinating to me. And I look up to her for a lot of what she has done and how she kind of just is authentically herself. This book was very interesting. Looking at her life, she's led a very peculiar life, to say the least. So she grew up in a cult, for a start, in Italy. It's hard to explain because it's very abnormal, I don't know, out of the ordinary. Her father basically took her and all her siblings to America because he didn't like how the cult was being run anymore. And he wasn't a very well man. I can't remember what he had going on. I think he might have had bipolar. She had quite a few siblings. I think her father remarried. There was lots of crazy stuff within the family in that time. She was homeless for a period of time. She used to go to like gay nightclub raves when she was a teenager. She was basically picked up off the street by an agent a couple of times, launched into stardom as a sex symbol, was being told how she should look and dress and, you know, all these things. Had a bunch of shitty partners, then obviously the whole sexual assault, and then being blacklisted in Hollywood, and then kind of to the point of when this was all coming to a head, when she finally decided that that was enough and she wanted to take him down, basically, and he was prosecuted. Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, she kind of compares Hollywood to the cult she grew up in, basically, and it's a very creepy but also very accurate representation of Hollywood. Yeah, so I don't know. I know this is like, she's a controversial figure that most people are not a huge fan of, but I just wanted to include it because it was a very fascinating read. So even if, you know, you don't like her, you could find it very interesting to read about the life she has led and the kinds of things that she went through, her point of view. Like, there was a lot about kind of feeling kind of like an alien and not really understanding why the world works the way it works. Like, how can people be like that, you know? And that's kind of a mindset that I relate to a lot. I definitely have grown up feeling that way and continue to feel that way now, where I just don't understand the way a lot of people function. And it's obviously from her point of view. There are some really awful moments in there, obviously. Trigger warning of the sexual assault, she talks about that in there. Also assault of children, drug use, abusive relationships, abuse of power dynamics, things like that. There's a lot of trigger warnings for this book, so I recommend you have like a, I don't know, a Google for that. That's my video talking about the non-fiction books that have impacted me the most so far. Leave a like on this video, leave a comment down below, let me know a non-fiction book that you think I might enjoy, or if you have gone and read my non-fiction TBR where I talk about all the non-fiction books I still have not read. Let me know which one of them you think I should read next. Subscribe to my channel, I make a video every week. I talk about queer stuff, disabled stuff, and books. And that's it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next week. Bye.